before this episode begins, in previous instalments covering the Gunfighters, and definitely in the next episode, where episode 4 and the gunfight at the OK Corral is covered, I talk a lot about the cinematographer, the film cameraman, Ken Westbury, who's responsible for the film work in the Gunfighters. When I recorded these commentaries, Ken was still with us, but sadly I've learnt as I've been, just as I finished putting these episodes together, but I had to do a bit of minor surgery to this one, so I'm recording this introduction especially to cover this sad situation that Ken Westbury, at the grand age of 96, he was a clapper loader on Kind Hearts and Coronets. He worked on Whiskey Galore, The Cruel Sea, a lot of those brilliant Ealing films, as well as being the film cameraman on many a Doctor Who, including he did The Abominable Snowmen, but not the film, not the location footage, but he did some of the stuff in the studio, the sort of model work and all of that. But is big too, really. He also did The Invasion of Time. But the ones that I think are most relevant to Happy Times and Places right now are this one, The Gunfighters, where he does some sterling work, and Fury from the Deep, which has been subject to previous scrutiny on Happy Times and Places, and for which Ken gave us an interview for the commentary on the release of the animated version of Fury from the Deep. I'm so glad I got to spend some time in his orbit. A real legend, one that Doctor Who was lucky to have. He also was BAFTA nominated for Pennies from Heaven and The Singing Detective, and he was a nice and really helpful guy, and it was a great pleasure that we were able to get him onto the DVD range and that he contributed to it so generously. But he will be popping up, as I say, in the mentions, but mostly I think of next week's episode, of the next instalment, episode 4 of the Gunfighters, and I'm talking about him in the present tense because at that point this sad event had not happened. But R.I.P. Ken Westbury, a legend of the industry and probably one of the more undersung heroes of Doctor Who. And I'm no singer, but I try to occasionally compose the right tune when the circumstances require me to do so. With rings on their fingers and bells on their toes, it's Happy Times and Places, in which I, Toby Haydoke, ringless and bellless, the only thing I'll be ringing is the positives as I watch an episode of Doctor Who and try and guess what my special guest's favourite thing about it might be.
Hello, my name is Martin Jameson. I was born Martin Jacobs, and my father was Anthony Jacobs, who was an actor who some of you will know, played Doc Holliday in the 4-part Doctor Who series with William Hartnell called Gunfighters.
Well, welcome one and all. We're enjoying the Gunfighters here at Happy Times and Places. You darn tootin' we are. It's a joy to be doing this and getting sort of feedback live as I'm releasing one episode at a time, just because of the way that it's fallen out. I haven't had the opportunity to do the whole thing in one go, but it means that I release it over on Patreon, and it feels like I'm watching along with everybody over in that enclave of joy that is patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. But that's not why I'm mentioning it. I try and leave the plugs to the end of the show. However, it's simply that this has been quite unusual because people have been joining in and going, yeah, I like this. So I was glad that Jim Smith, for example, mentioned "Let's hope the piano knows it," which is a beautiful line that I'd talked over. And we're enjoying Matthew Jacobs giving a great insight into his dad, who plays Doc Holliday, who I think is one of the strongest things about this story. And Joe Llewellyn, who's a viewer from the States, has been saying that he's been enjoying the story and that putting the bad accents to one side. So I asked Joe who he felt was doing a good job and who was doing a bad job accent-wise. I put in my 2 penn'orth worth. I think Anthony Jacobs, John Alderson, and Shane Rimmer, and then coming up Reed DeRuin, who was a genuine American, were the strongest, and certainly Billy and Ike were the weakest. We'll get to Johnny Ringo this episode, and Joe says, yeah, he feels that Anthony Jacobs is pretty spot on and doing the sort of Southern gentleman thing very well, and the Clanton boys are not so hot. So that's from not from the horse's mouth, but from the United States of America's mouth. So thanks to Joe for that insight. But everyone's having a good time watching it, and I'm going to continue to do that. This story that for years was, the one story you could in the days, as I say, growing up, the idea that any old Doctor Who would be bad, it was all hallowed ground. Apart from, the Gunfighters was bad, the worst Doctor Who story ever, and there was kind of little besmirchments within write-ups of Underwater Menace was deemed to be slightly, subpar. The Space Pirates was slow. Invasion of the Dinosaurs had unsuccessful dinosaurs. Ambassadors of Death was sort of a bit choppy. Colony in Space was perhaps underwhelming for the first story to go into space of the Pertwee era. Those were the sort of little rumblings early on. Those were the ones that might have been slightly question marked. But most things were great. And then, of course, we got to that point where I remember finding a Doctor Who bulletin on the stall at a Doctor Who convention, and I was. They'd done their poll, and it had the all-time classics and all-time clangers, and it was like a brave new world. People make lists of the stories they think are awful. This is terribly exciting, and I revelled in those, and I read them over and over again. And then, of course, other things come out which start, saying what's bad about the thing that you like. And you go, oh, this is really exciting. I suddenly feel all, I love. I love to sort of give a kicking to a story, especially if it's a story that everybody likes. So I would do a kick, even if just in my own head. I'd write my own guidebooks at home, where I take great joy in sort of pulling up a story that I thought had too good a reputation. But of course also, sticking up for the stories everyone slagged off, because, everybody slags those stories off. So let me tell you that actually they're hugely underrated. So, of course, I've never quite been able to give a fair and proper assessment to the Gunfighters because of my predilection to sort of stick up for the underappreciated, to get behind the underdog, which I'm not sure is an entirely as benevolent as I probably like to think it is. I think there's a certain streak of elitism about it. Actually, going, I can see the quality in this thing that the hoi polloi slag off. So I'm not bigging myself up when I say I've always felt that the Gunfighters was good fun and better than its reputation. I do think that speaks to a little bit of my own vanity. We're complicated creatures, aren't we? And perhaps I'm delving too deep into my own psychology when thinking about Doctor Who, but I mean that could be the story of my life. Anyway, what I do know for sure is that I've been enjoying watching the Gunfighters as part of this Happy Times and Places. I hope if you've come as somebody that's used to it being slated, you've found some some kinship in this love-in, and if you're somebody that doesn't like it, the positivity that emanates from this has maybe made you a bit more sympathetic towards it. Let's see. I hope so. I hope mostly that you're just entertained and you don't think I'm a prick, base. That's my main aim in life, full stop. But nothing is guaranteed, but I do my best. Anyway, let us now watch episode 3 of the Gunfighters, which is named after it's an episode that is named after the new character that comes in, about whom there's quite a lot to say. So we are going to press play. I'm wrangling a lot of remote controls at the moment. We're going to press play in 3, 2, 1. And it's time for Johnny Ringo. Which gives the story a sort of new lease of life with a new, fairly major presence in the story. And in fact, he is the main guest star. Lawrence Payne gets top guest billing in this. He's in it, and he's, and so, he's great. Yeah, above John Alderson, who's come over from Hollywood. So these are major castings. This is not done on the done on the cheap. This cliffhanger looks like it's been played back from film. There we go. Now, I've been thinking about cliffhangers and reprises, because even some that are the same might have been re-recorded with the session last week and have minor differences. So I haven't compared the two. Some, of course, are reenacted. That one wasn't reenacted this week. So it was either played in from last week's or it was recorded again after last. The only thing that makes me question is I think Ike Clanton's delivery of his line is slightly different, but that could be me imagining it, because cliffhangers that we don't know are remounted or alternate takes are fairly murky in the missing episodes. And in fact, I was listening to Rhys Williams, pointed there by Rick Byatt, faithful and kind and supportive patron and other things, that Galaxy 4, the reconstruction, has cliffhanger elements that we've not had released before on soundtrack or on physical media, but they're not even on the animation, because some of the soundtracks when they were recorded were sort of chopped together, and I've mused on that on the Marco Polo Too Much Informations about whether the cliffhangers and reprises we have are actually the correct ones, and I've not quite got to the bottom of that. But that's got nothing to do with this, apart from the fact that it's made me imagine. So don't write in. I'm not. It's no great mystery that. It's just I suddenly thought, oh, has he delivered that line slightly differently? Because that is a possibility. But I think it's more likely that it's just last week's played in from film. Although, no, because it would have had the. I like that. I'll lay you out so cold you'll freeze. Very good. I'm going to revisit that cliffhanger. But anyway, this. So yes, I remember this because Phineas gets quite a bit more to do in the book, because he gets put in jail. Phineas is the funniest of the Clanton brothers in the book. The book is very different. The book is, of course, narrated by Ned Buntline, who was a real reporter, wasn't he? But that's a brilliant shot. I love the amount of depth of field that Tucker gets in that shot. Look at the buildings behind with what looks like a light in a top window. There's even an extra there who is possibly Chinese, which gives a bit more of a sort of accurate depiction of the sort of the human landscape, as it were, of the time, and unusual for Doctor Who at that time. So a little bit of an attention to detail. I mean, this is, I know it's in the studio, but it's night shooting. There's a sort of darkness and shadow. And isn't Charlie a prick? He comes and interferes. And you can see what David Graham is trying to do here with his, is it Walter Brennan? The kind of, oh, hey boss, I'm gonna, and has he got cotton wool in his cheeks? But he's giving real character to this. That's awful. I mean, Charlie's a terrible, a gossip and trying to get in. He says it. I don't want you boys getting into trouble, but it's because he's, he loves being involved, and he loves sort of being part of it and manipulating and gossiping, which is what undoes him, as we will see later. But look at me, it's wonderfully sort of craven at the back there. It's a performance I'm not quite sure works, but I enjoy what he's doing. But I'm loving this. That must be a photo blow up at the back, but you can see the lights in the windows, and a wagon and everything, and sometimes when these episodes are tarted up, those backdrops look a bit phony. And I can see that one is slightly, but but I mean, that's on a massive screen and really, really tarted up. I think the design by Barry Newbury is superb. He's gone kind of mental under Herb's heavy blow. This is where Rex Tucker's writing of the extra verses because the song was in it, but Rex Tucker, the director, decided to get some extra verses in there in order that the incidental music, be the song, which divides people. I think it's absolutely fine. I love I love the fact that following a story about nightmarish versions of children's parlor games, and before a story that is a thoughtful philosophical sci-fi tale about exploitation, you've got a comedy western where the incidental music is a song. I love the way Reed DeRuin decides to pay by flicking his coin and banging it on the desk. He immediately comes in with a much better accent than anybody else because he's actually American. He's also got a bowler hat on, which I love, and I just love how dirty his shirt is and things like that. You know, all these guys absolutely stink and are grotty and have got sort of grime in every pore, and he is poor Clanton. He's grime in every pore Clanton. But Reed DeRuin at some point was writing a Doctor Who script with John Pertwee. He was mates with John Pertwee. But I remember, I think Peter Purvis knew Reed DeRuin and had been a stage play with him. But it's funny, I get on very well with Peter Purvis, and he's a nice man and an excellent broadcaster and great to have on a commentary. But I have to limit the amount of times I correct him. It's just me sensing, because he makes quite a few statements in commentaries that aren't necessarily true, which is fine when you haven't got a moderator, and it's a bit awkward when you are the moderator, because you sort of get. And I think there was a couple of things I'd corrected him on in this, and so when he said Reed DeRuin was Canadian, I'm sure he does in the commentary, I just let that go, even though I knew he was American, because I felt I'd pushed it enough. So that's one of the things nobody talks about when you're being a moderator. It's sometimes you have to, for the sake of being polite and politic, because also you don't want your whole role to be actually I think you'll find, because that's annoying. But his next extraction's gonna be a bullet. That's one of the rare somebody addresses a camera in Doctor Who. I mean, that's up there with the bootstrap paradox, and not even the sonic screwdriver will get us out of this one. Nobody talks about Charlie the barman breaking the fourth wall. A lot of high-angle camera shots. This is beautiful stuff, though. Look how high those steps go as well. This is a really good production in a way. And look, another high angle. These cameras are beautiful. Dodo in a hat. I love Dodo in a hat. Why doesn't everyone think this story is brilliant? I absolutely love it. Aside from whether the comedy is judged correctly or not, it's again, this is the story after the Celestial Toymaker and before the Savages. What a rich and varied template the show had under Wiles and Tosh, really sort of stretching. I know that they're not the credited producer and script editor on this, but they are the sort of people who developed it. And it's the end of Donald Cotton, who there's been a really good article about in Doc 2 magazine recently, and there's an excellent documentary online which really delve into him, and in many ways I sort of almost wish they hadn't, because you delve into anybody's life and there's triumph and disaster, and always the disaster makes me so sad. I always worried about Dodo in this one as well. She always looks to me like she's had a flu jab in her arm, because there's a sort of smudge of dirt on the top of her arm shirt, and I always think, oh, she looks like she's bleeding. That's great. I bumped into an old friend. He kind of lost his appetite. I mean, could you eat somebody's supper who you know's just been shot? I think that's really grim. It's the sense of humour is quite sort of. The spectre of death resides over it. Every joke is sort of flecked with the blood of the dead, which is the westerns were quite often sort of quite romantic stories. When I was younger, it was only when you grew up and watched the sort of the slightly dirtier ones, and the more morally complex ones, that you go. It certainly took me a while to realise that the Wild West was quite as. I think maybe my early understanding of it was, the lawmen always beat the baddies, but actually there's great moral complexity in the good westerns, isn't there? I mean, we did High Noon at university, and that's the wonderful film about, you know, everybody walking out on the knackered old Gary Cooper, and him then, and you know, that story is that the story of that is nothing really. It's just a series of betrayals. It's wonderful sort of character stuff, and that's got the song, hasn't it? Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. It's odd because I wouldn't often choose to watch a western, and there's some absolutely fantastic westerns. Now, Johnny Ringo is an absolute. I was going to use a rude word there, but he's horrible. He's very cool the way he smokes a black cheroot. He's very sexy. I think Lawrence Payne is has a real presence. He's very handsome, and he's all in black, and I think he's got black leather trousers, and I think that's a look that if you can pull it off, you're doing very, very well. This part was offered to Patrick Troughton, which would have been complicated, wouldn't it? Troughton as Johnny Ringo, would he then have been able to be cast as Doctor Who? I mean, you know, I know Freema Agyeman appears in the very next story, but that's different landscape, different circumstances. I don't think it would have put them off if they'd really wanted him, but it would have been the Maxil of the 60s. But it would have made this story have a different complexion. It would always be that one that's got the Doctor in it before he's the Doctor. And I always don't like that, because you know, when he says it's on the house and he goes, I never figured different, and you sort of go, but fancy there, that bit, fancy being that guy that you can just walk into a place and get free drinks, or you'll kill people. I mean, you know, come on, the Wild West, that's a bit mean. Well, and of course he then makes Charlie nervous. I mean, I know Charlie's a prick, but he makes Charlie nervous, so Charlie just goes, oh, I can't wait. But you know that also that's Charlie's subconscious speaking, that he probably would go and tell Wyatt Earp. But this is pretty grim. And nice bit of business where he's holding the bottle. May as well have drunk that. And that's really, really cruel and horrible. It's curtains for Charlie. The jokes here are pretty harsh. Doctor Who's always sort of made you feel the weight of individual deaths. This doesn't undermine them, although it's sort of comedic in a sense, but it's comedic and grim. It's pretty unpleasant stuff. Charlie the barman has gotten a shroud, or has gotten a shroud. Yeah, that's pretty bad news for poor old Charlie. But it establishes Ringo as a force to be reckoned with. He's wonderful in the book. He's really pretentious and reads Latin, doesn't he? And he's got that great joke where he gets killed, which is a great joke, where he gets shot. And he says, my ghoul has just been divided into 3 parts, which is tortuous. But it kind of, and you go, is that the whole reason you decided to make him this sort of pretentious leaf reader of Latin? I really like that. This is a great scene for Dodo, and I love the fact that, you know, Doc's sort of laughing, and then he sort of waits and takes it pretty seriously. He's always got a stray bit of moustache in the middle, which I wish they'd get rid of. That stray bit of moustache really annoys me, especially as I think it is a false moustache. It is a false moustache. I wish they'd get rid of that bit at the front. It really bothers me. It's a bit like the spittle in the Master of the Land of Fiction in The Mind Robber. Once you notice it, it never goes away. So I'm sorry if I've now given you an eye worm in the shape of a wispy bit of Doc Holliday moustache. He's wearing a hairpiece and a moustache. He was a bald man, Anthony Jacobs. I think at this stage. I'm sure Martin will correct me if I'm wrong. Everything I've seen him in, he's no hair on top, but round the sides. That I love that scene. I think that might be Dodo's best scene in Doctor Who, where she forces Doc Holliday and then leans against him with the gun. And she's so jolly here. And then he produces the gun and goes, I didn't want to shoot you either. So it's all this. And I mean, people don't faint in things anymore. And obviously the idea that women might faint because they're slightly overwhelmed by something is extraordinarily dated now. But I think it's very funny there. And I love that whole scene. I think that whole scene is totally charming and probably Dodo's best moment in Doctor Who, and will probably be my choice for this episode. Although, be warned, Martin has sort of been listing a number of things. He's not been going for one particular thing. That's his interpretation of the brief, and that is fine. But it means that there are going to be no winners and losers, or basically it means I am probably going to lose, but in a slightly different way to the way I normally lose. Look. Oh, yeah, and talking of accents, I don't know where, in heaven's name, Johnny Ringo is supposed to be. Because Payne already has a slightly pinched delivery. He has a diction that has a pattern that is noticeable throughout of all of his performances. In that you can tell that it's him talking when he's playing Morix and in the Leisure Hive and Dastari in the Two Doctors. He has a certain way of pronouncing certain words that are very much his. But he's obviously trying to do an accent here. But when he goes, oh, Charlie, you talk too much, well, that might be his character doing an accent, putting on an accent in the same way that, we do sometimes put on accents when we say certain things. Occasionally, one might put on well, we do. I can't think of examples now, but there's sometimes where you go, "Oh, what a mistake of a maker," or whatever. You put on an accent, or I will sometimes say something with an Irish accent or something. Just I don't know. It's just a sort of tick that we do, isn't it? When we're trying to say that something's not being serious, or we're just trying to say it in a slightly more frivolous way, or we're just bored and trying to make the conversation sound different. I don't know, but we do that, and that's what he might be doing when he says, "Oh, Charlie, you talk too much," huh? But unfortunately, that doesn't help with what he's supposed to be doing the rest of the time, because he's got this sort of RSC kind of diction. He's a well-spoken, although he does have that slightly particular delivery and pronunciation that he has, on which he's trying, it seems, to overlay an American accent. I read an interview with him once where he said that when he first did it, everyone burst out laughing, and I can sort of see why. And again, not to I do a whole monologue on accents last week. Listen to that if you can bear it. I'm not sure he's altogether successful. I love this. You've got a picture of it. Excellent marks there for John Alderson for throwing Johnny Ringo's picture away. Very good. Have I missed the bit where the Doctor says the line about Doc Holliday going, he lent me a gun, he extracted my tooth, what more do you want? I love all of that. Richard Beale's doing some great cleaning his gun business there. Who in Thunder would want to kill Charlie? Oh, and Martin Huntley here as Warren Earp. Now, I've read quite a lot about the actual gunfight at the OK Corral, and an Earp brother was murdered. And it was Morgan Earp was murdered, wasn't it? And not Warren. Yes, so they've changed that up slightly, and I don't know why. Oh, a couple of cowboys. That's a nice piece of suggests the place is slightly more populous. And you do get a sense of location here. You do get the sense that Stephen and Ringo have sort of ridden out together. I'm never entirely convinced by Johnny Ringo taking Stephen along with him, but it's quite fun. Yes, Warren Earp is Martin Huntley, who has been a Robo-Man in Dalek Invasion of Earth, and he's one of the prisoners in the Sensorites. And he told me that he didn't actually have an agent and was always done through BBC casting. So he gets 3 nice little parts in the Hartnell era, but had a family and ended up selling insurance, he told me. And we got him in for the Censorites for part 6 for the commentary. We didn't need him for this one because the Gunfighters was one that had a load of people still alive from at that point. And they did. I was before my time was Dalek Invasion of Earth, but that still had quite a number of cast. So the only opportunity we got to talk to him was on part 6 of the Censorites, and he's turned down opportunities to do stuff since. So we got him then, and as I say, he's not really agreed to do anything before or since. So he's given the time again, I think we'd got him in front of a camera and got him to tell us about everything. But you do what you can at the time. I sort of buy that these two have a history as well. Sheena Marsh is really appealing to me this time around. I've looked at other things when I've looked at the story in the past, but I think she's key to this story, and she's obviously an important part, but the way that she plays against Anthony Jacobs and William Hartnell in that scene I enjoyed last time, and now Lawrence Payne here, is kind of key, and she's very sort of flirty and sassy, and but without being glib. I think Sheena Marsh is excellent, and she never, sadly, sort of responded or played ball when approached. Just one of those people that didn't want to talk for whatever reason. Sometimes people think they're not interesting. Sometimes people aren't interested. It's whatever. That's not a way to chat people up, Johnny Ringo. If a lady doesn't do what you want, don't point a gun in her face, or maybe do. Whatever works for you. But yeah, he's suddenly made the thing seem a little bit darker. I remember Phineas in the book being quite fun, and Shane Rimmer reads the audiobook because it's written, in the American idiom, and is closer in some ways to historical fact because, as I'm sure we will discuss next week, the actual gunfight in the OK Corral, only Billy Clanton was killed, and there were and Frank and Jack McClary, the McClary brothers, who do make an entrance in the book, but this is a sort of simplified version, and you don't have to be too hard on historical fact when you're doing Doctor Who as a comedy western. Right on the desk. His accent's not actually bad, and he's very sweet as he's very sort of rangy, isn't he? A rangy physique. Tall. Oh, that's so sad. Poor old Warren. It's a curious one though, because he's a character we've only just met. And it's horrible, isn't it, that one of them shouts "Yahoo!" as they've just killed a man, a very young man as well, which is very sad. He's not quite dead yet, is he? Because you get some last words next week. It's a curious way to end the episode on the sort of death of a character we've only just met, and then we go into next week, which has all sorts of things going on behind and in front of the camera. But I think that was a good episode because sometimes episode 3 can be a bit meandery, but you've introduced a new threat. And, springing the Clanton brother at the end as well, it means that they're on course to do what the next episode promises, which is the OK Corral. You're selling yourself short. You should call it the Splendid Corral. Very good. The Tremendous Corral. I was always a bit sad when I first watched this, that because the Clanton brothers always get the first line of dialogue in every episode, except next week, but that's because they cut the recap, but that's after they've done the credits, that people like... John Alderson and Lawrence Payne aren't higher up the credits because, of course, then it was all done in order of appearance by the Doctor. But that means that sometimes, you know, like episode 3 of The Underwater Menace, Zaroff gets second billing, which seems so right, even though it's just an accident of his appearance. I'm not going to talk about the credits. This is the last time, though, Rex Tucker is credited on an episode of Doctor Who. We shall talk about why next week when we're all on film. So interesting. I enjoyed that. I definitely think my favourite part is the scene between Dodo and Doc Holliday where she persuades him to take her back, and they have that little face-off, and then it's revealed that he could have shot her at all time anyway. So that's all good. What does Martin Jameson, Holby City and BBC Radio scriptwriter and son of Doc Holliday himself, Anthony Jacobs, think about episode 3?
Wow, I've just finished watching episode 3, Johnny Ringo, and it's very dark. I mean, the body count, all sorts of people are getting killed. The Charlie, the barman, who was really good, somebody called Graham, is actually one of the better actors in it. He gets killed, although he gets shot and then by a 6-shooter and then falls forward, which is obviously, physically impossible. But anyway, he that's what he does, and he dies, and it's terribly sad because we lose one of the better actors. And then there's a lynching, and Peter Purves is going to be hanged, and there's a whole thing going on with my dad and Dodo Dupont, and it's like, wow, what on earth is going on there? It's like really dodgy. And there's a man with a stammer is being humiliated. I mean, it's so great. This was shot before the days of health and safety gone mad. No, it isn't. That's me being ironic. Do not cancel me. Anyway, it's very dark. I still haven't got a clue. Johnny Ringo's appeared, and he's after some people, and there are some people after some people, and they come in, they shoot Wyatt Earp's brother. I mean, honestly, I used to think that I would struggle with Stephen Moffat's scripts, right? I hadn't a clue what was going on, but wow, they are clear as day compared to this. I have not got a clue, but I'm going to watch the final episode. I have to say, to be fair, there is a thing which is great, which is that it's kind of dirty. The cowboys, they speak with these sort of semi-English accents, but they've got grime on them, which I like, and Peter Purves is in a sort of like a fancy dress costume. But, wow, it's kind of trippy. So I'm now going to watch the final episode, which is called the OK Corral. So this is going to be great. Oh yeah, and the other thing is the Doctor. It's hardly in it. He it's not really. Where are these old Doctor Who's like this, where the Doctor doesn't really appear? He's kind of turns up every now and again and does some kind of quaint old guy stuff. I used to think he was scary, but he's kind of this old guy, and he turns up every now and again and says some stuff, but he's nothing to do with the story. That's also really odd. So, I'm going to watch the last episode now, and I'm very excited about it.
Ha! Well, if you think he does nothing this week, you wait till next week, Martin. Martin name-checked Mr. Graham there playing Charlie the barman, so as I know that Martin will listen to this, and probably before I have time to talk to him, because I'll just send him the files, it's not just any old Mr. Graham, it's Peppa Pig's granddad, David Graham, who's also the voice of the Daleks in the 60s, and also Professor Kerensky in the Doctor Who story City of Death, but most famously, the voice of Parker from Thunderbirds. So that is maybe why you enjoyed his performance so, Martin. He's a bloomin' legend, and still doing Peppa Pig from his bedroom in Hampstead. He's suffered a stroke recently, but is still working into his 90s. Is he 96, 97? Maybe a bit younger than that, actually. But he's still going strong. And delivering a performance propped up and from home, but good for him. What a legend. And I mean, Charlie, as I say, I'm not sure it's a performance that massively works for me, even though I applaud the sentiment behind it. But he's supposed to be, slightly annoying and that kind of. So fine. And as for Phileas's stammer, well, that was introduced by Maurice Good, just I think because there's not much to differentiate the three Clanton brothers. They are slightly better drawn in the book, I would say. And I don't think it helps that, Bill is the sort of intemperate youngster, and there's a few lines that sort of acknowledge that, and he's the sort of hothead, and he shoots the bottles, doesn't he, in episode 1 in the bar, and he's a bit of an arse, and there's I think there's a great exchange next week, isn't there, when he goes, I never took you for a back shooter, Ringo, and Johnny Ringo goes, I never took you for any kind of shooter, Billy, which I can't like, but you can see with and Maurice Good is has come in as the actor of the three of the Clanton brothers who's just had a big stage success as perhaps the one with the most heft. So he's probably got, can I stick something in here to make me stick out so that the Clanton brothers aren't too anonymous, especially as bless William Herndale for all he's trying. He's not making much of an impact as Ike. So it's the actor throwing in a stutter, which in those days was a bit of a nod for character. I don't see them particularly that it's doing that to make a victim of him or anything like that. Nobody has a go at Phileas for having a stutter particularly. It's just there for a bit of business. And as somebody who has a bit of a stammer myself, I don't take it personally, so I don't mind that. And I think I think not everything is offensive, even if it's something that if I chose to, I could take offence to. But it interests me that sort of Martin finds the story confusing because it's very hard, isn't it, when you're a Doctor Who fan and you know this stuff like the back of your hand. I kind of take it for granted. I could explain the plot of this to you, but I have seen it hundreds of times. I mean, I have, well, not literally hundreds of times, but I've seen it tens of times. I've seen it over 20 times, I should think. Yeah, for sure. And of course, I've read the book, and I've read the Doctor Who archives, and I've read the story. Blah, 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 blah. But coming to it once, I'm surprised, and that's but Martin is a scriptwriter and a very experienced and skilled one. But this seems to me to be perfectly straightforwardly plotted. Any oddness about it is sort of style and genre, rather than. But it's a bit like when Nicholas Parsons is on the commentary for the Doctor Who story, The Curse of Fenric, on the DVD, and he goes, well, of course, none of this makes any sense, but the Doctor Who fans, they make it all make sense. And you're wanting to go, no, this makes perfect sense. All of this is happening for a reason. And it's a bit of, poor old, I feel sorry for Ian Briggs, who's, plotted it to the hilt and gone, and these monsters, and this is their back history, and they're rising from the sea here because of this, and this. And Nicholas Parsons just going, yeah, I'm sure it's all just some sort of crazed, accidental smorgasbord of weird ideas flung. No, he's laboured really hard to make that work. So I sometimes struggle with some of the how some of the time paradoxy stuff works in the Moffat scripts, sure, but they're almost designed to make you sort of want to wrangle them and piece them together, and they're intricate jigsaws, and they're sort of there's a deliberate abstraction about those sometimes, but it surprises me that Martin is not finding this as easy to follow. But again, I have the luxury of knowing this stuff like the back of my hand, and I think we forget that sometimes as Doctor Who fans, that we are very fluent in a language that lots of people might not be. But I do take the point about the Doctor sort of coming in and out. But I think Donald Cotton's Doctor is very different to other Doctors. But that's what's very interesting about the series as a whole, in that a different writer can come in and have a different idea about how the Doctor should should behave. I mean, different producers come in, and under John Wiles, who had gone by the time that this was on, but had been the producer when this story was commissioned. I mean, there are John Wiles episodes where Hartnell comes in towards the end of the Dalek Master Plan. Hartnell, comes in 5 minutes before the end of the episode for a couple of scenes, and is hugely underused. And the Celestial Toymaker, which has just gone, he's missing for the middle 2 episodes, apart from his hand and some dubbed dialogue. I mean, that was so he could have a holiday, but a real holiday for the Doctor. But when it was being done 48 weeks a year, and you've got a leading man who's not in the best of health, he's not as central sometimes. But there's an added detachment with Cotton, who makes him this slightly sort of bewildered onlooker, which is really going to happen next week, when the massive final film sequence does not require. In fact, the Doctor's not on film at all for any of this. So the guest stars. Are used for much of the filming, which is where a lot of those pictures that we have, which really concentrate on the Clanton brothers and Doc and those guys. There's a brilliant shot of Ike on the top of the stairs that's got Ken Westbury, the cameraman, in. So we've got lots of lovely film camera work to see next week. But I'm glad Martin is enjoying it. He did mention a couple of things that I picked out. The grime, which I think is lovely and authentic and very nice, although I still am bothered by Dodo's flu jab. That still makes my arm ache slightly. And that scene between Dodo and the Doc, which I didn't think was dodgy. That was fun. It was fun. She was trying to manipulate him to take her back, and he sort of sensed that he really didn't mind her doing it, because he kind of agreed, but he didn't have to, and there's a little sort of game of etiquette there about I kind of want to go back, but I'm going to have to make this woman's going to have to threaten me with a gun, and I'm going to have to give her my word, and then I'll sort of do it. And that opens up the sort of the story dynamics between him and Kate and Johnny, and that leads us to where we get to at the end, which is all lovely. So I think that's a great episode. It's certainly a good episode 3 as well, which has that slightly different dynamic of sexy Johnny Ringo and his bad guy's leather trousers. Dodo in a hat. Love Dodo in a hat. So, well done. My favourite thing was that scene between Dodo and Doc, which is also, I think, my favourite scene for Dodo. And we lost Jackie Lane last year, and I met Jackie Lane on a train, and she's this sort of enigmatic figure, and she's not great in most of her Doctor Who, and it's lovely to see when she's given something to do. She has a lot of fun with it, and she's only 4 episodes. No, sorry, she's 8 episodes time. She's got one more story. Stephen goes next time, and then she goes halfway through the following story. So, she's on her way. Has she been fired by now? Does she know? No, because I'm sure Peter says that he was told at very, very late notice, and I know Innes Sloyd sends Jackie a sort of apology going, you were the sort of victim of circumstance, but I know that she didn't feel that was quite enough, and that she'd been slightly messed about, and I think she was, and I think it was tough being a companion in Doctor Who in those days, because Maureen O'Brien got rather unceremoniously dumped. Peter wasn't wild about the speed with which he was sort of got rid of, and the way that it was done. And then Jackie, and then their replacements, Michael Craze and Annika Wills, come in, loads of promise. Fraser Hines turns up, and it's right, you guys can get lost, and actually well before your contract is over. And again, essentially in episode 2 of your finals, I know they come back for a film sequence in episode 6, but they're essentially hoiked out of the door. It's show, but I think of modern show business as being very cruel and unkind, but even in the sort of not particularly rarefied atmosphere of a weekly tea time serial on the BBC in 1966, 65, 66, life was cruel. It was like the Wild West. We get romantic about it, but actually there's a lot of specks of blood over all the things that we like to look at. And on that thought, it's curtains for this episode. I hope you've liked it. This sort of improvisation makes me sound like I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I think you'll find. I don't even know why I brought up the cliffhanger reprise, which I think it was just something in William Herndl's delivery of the line that made me think, oh, is that different to how I'm used to it? And of course it wasn't. It's exactly the same, because it's the same take. It is the footage from last week. I just had a little bit of a sort of brain fart going, oh, is that a thing? And then, of course, enunciated that, because if something comes into my head, I seem compelled to say it out loud. I then tied myself up in knots over something that if I just had the courage of my convictions and gone, no, it's last week's footage, played into this week, as quite often happened, and that's the case here. So I think you'll find there's nothing for you to tell me I think I'll find, because I think you'll find that I've already found. I'd already found it. I never lost it. I didn't need to even go a-looking. But there we go. I just have very tiresome mental thought processes that compel me to then indulge in very tiresome verbal outpourings. You only have to listen to it. I have to be it. Thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Martin Jameson, who can be found on Twitter at SmartArts, but that's arts with a Z, which is the story code of the Gunfighters. It all meshes together. I'm grateful to Martin and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include David Crew, Steve Cunniff, Dave Curran, Simon Curtis, Paul Philip Dahlgren, Matt Dale, Rob Dawson, Chris Davies, Hugh Davies, Robert Davis, Shanti Day, Ian Dean, Tim Dickinson, Sean Ditchfield, Drew, Paul Dykes, Andrew East, Jeff Edwards, Andrew Egan, Fleet Boy, Mark Findlay Smith, Chris Bone, Nev Fountain, David Gillespie Pratt, Charles Gears, Lisa Gledhill, Robin Groan, Paul J. Guest, Thomas Guerrier, Aaron Gullias, William Hames, John, Luke Hannington, Susan Harrison, Steve Hatcher, Duncan Harvey, Ronald Hayden, Paul Hayes, Matthew Herbert, and Stephen Hill. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Do you know what? In all honesty, I wasn't happy about that sign-off. I think I was sort of trying to improvise the song, and then when I said it, which is a very bad word to try and have as part of a sort of rhyming couplet or whatever. I mean, yeah, it is such a sort of anodyne word. I think I could have been a bit more inventive than that. But I thought, well, you think in a split second when you're improvising, don't you? That, well, don't do anything too complicated, because then I can come up with something funny to conclude with. And of course, the funny that I did was to break off. And I don't think it was clear. I don't think it works from the delivery or from what I was doing. I think the joke I was trying to do was I was breaking off before I said the word tit. So you'd go, oh, you nearly said the word tit there, but it broke off, and that's funny. If funny is something that's been done loads of times and far better in far better circumstances. But I don't even think it was that clear. So wasn't clear, wasn't good. But just to prove that it's all live. I mean, it's not live. I could go back and re-edit it, but I'm not going to. It's easier for me to just debase myself and apologise rather than redo the thing. I think it's dishonest to redo the thing as well. What you get with Happy Times and Places is a stream of consciousness, because what you get with Too Much Information and Indefinable Magic, my other two podcasts, are sort of heavily scripted and poured over and edited and re-edited and blah, blah, blah. And I've got to have some that I can just sort of throw out there. So for better or worse, and in the case of the ending of this particular episode, it was worse. But I thought I'd let you know. I knew that, so that you don't need to let me know. Because people do, you know. People always let you know. If you would like to join that list of names and hear yourself being read out by me over the closing theme, well, that is just one of the bonus things that you get if you are a patron at patreon.com Toby Haydock. You would have heard this podcast 6 months earlier as well, if you're listening to this in the sort of normal release schedule on iTunes or Podbean or Spotify or wherever you're listening. If you're on Patreon, you get Happy Times and Places at least 6 months ahead, and the other podcasts a month or so ahead. There are also some exclusive AMAs and an exclusive podcast called Far Too Much Information, plus various other bits and bobs that non-patrons do not get. That's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You get all of that for as little as £3 a month. There are higher tiers with other little trinkets as you ascend the pay scale, but there's nothing essential that you're denied at the lowest tier, which is £3 per month. All of the tiers also qualify for a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in one go, and you are charged from the point of joining. So it doesn't actually matter at which point in the month that you join either. So don't worry about that. No tricks or hidden costs or anything like that. And it just helps me to spend proper time doing these, to record them on decent equipment, and to go back and redo bits that I'm not happy with and do a proper job. I hope it's a proper job is being done, and also to keep these ad-free. I mean, they'll remain ad-free anyway because I don't like adverts. I don't like sort of break off and go, yes, look, here's a Shane Rimmer here. And, I was thinking when I was watching Shane Rimmer, I really need a proper grooming set or food delivered to my doorstep, prepared just the way that I want. All of that. I can't do it. You could tell how I automatically started stumbling. I'm not very good at it. So you're not keeping these ad-free, but you're justifying my decision to not take any money from the usual suspects in the old podcasting world. I don't want loads of adverts on these, so there aren't going to be any. But if you don't want to or can't do the monthly thing, you can do the odd one-off payment on Ko-fi, which is just a way of subsidising the arts, if we can loosely call it that, but in the way that you might a busker on the tube. If you're walking past and you fancy it, you can fling a few coins, and they're cyber coins, they're internet coins, and they're metaphorical cups of coffee, which is why it's called Ko-fi.com, which is ko-fi Kofi.com/Toby Haydock. It's the way we do things these days. If we're creators of content, hate that word, we fling this stuff out there, and I know it's all free, and that's absolutely fine. But it's also, there's a sort of voluntary payment system, which I think it sort of suits everybody. You don't have to if you don't want to or can't. And if you want to, and people do, and I'm very, very grateful. So I'm very happy with the situation. I hope you are too, and I hope you enjoy what I'm sending out. And if it's just that you sort of enjoy listening, and that's enough, that's fine. And I also know that times are tough, and we need all the free entertainment that we can get. And if I provide that for you, I am grateful. I am mostly grateful to people just for listening. However, if you can go to iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, all those places where you get these, and if there is a place where you can review them, please leave a few lines of review, and a 5-star rating really helps to make my algorithms look very sexy to any passing punter who may wish to take my algorithms home for the night. Oh, yeah. Should we leave that metaphor there? But yeah, it costs you nothing, just a little bit of your time. If you could say something nice and boost that star rating for me, that really does help, and I would be very grateful. Social media is where it's at. I'm trying to be better at Instagram. I'm on toby.haydock on Instagram, and I'm learning to edit videos and all sorts. So a lot of it to do with my stand-up comedy night, Excess Malarkey, which is every Tuesday in Manchester. I've been doing sort of potted versions of those. But as this occurs to me, I might do little sort of potted versions of the visual video version of Happy Times and Places, which I've frankly not had the time to get onto YouTube as much as I would like, which is a shame, because a lot of people have recorded, the guests have recorded videos for their introductions and for their choosing of their favourite things, and that would they would have benefited hugely from being available on video, but which was fine in lockdown when I had a bit of time and I was practicing my editing and stuff. But it's for the amount of people watching them compared to the amount of people who download these, spending time doing the audios seemed to be a better system. But I don't want to waste those videos that people have done me. So let's see. But I might do little potted, edited highlights of the visual version to lead people to these. So if that's how you've come here, hello, thanks for coming via Instagram. If you haven't, I'm practicing with the old videos. I haven't done TikTok yet, people are suggesting that I should. I mean, how many social media platforms does one have to be on? My phone pings now, and I have to check Messages, Messenger, WhatsApp. There are all sorts of different ways. My emails, I've got different email addresses as well. I mean, I could get a message. Sometimes I spend ages looking for a message and go, I actually don't know where that message actually is. And then if somebody's texted you but somebody else, you have to find the correct combination to find that text. Where happened the other day when a friend of ours left us some Aquilegia plants on the doorstep, and she texted us, but I couldn't find it. And also I searched Aquilegia, but she'd called it Aquilibra, so couldn't find that. And it was because I thought she'd included her partner in the text stream as well as Shez, my partner. So I was looking for ones with all four of us, or just the two of us, or just me and Shez, and it wasn't. It was me, Shez, and her. So I didn't look for that guy. It's all very complicated, and I'm relatively young. Imagine what I'll be like when I'll be 80. I'll be very confused about everything. But until then, I shall keep making content and bunging it out there, and I hope you can consume it. Oh, this is supposed to be where I'm plugging the social medias. Right. Instagram, toby.haydoke. I want to up my Instagram. I'm bad at Instagram. I'm trying to get better at Instagram because I'm doing all right on Twitter without much effort, But that's the intersection of Doctor Who, comedy, and impetigo. Basically, I have lots of psoriasis followers as well because I did blog about psoriasis for a bit. So it's quite a good, it's quite an interesting Venn diagram. That well, bad skin and Doctor Who fans and comedians. Actually, there is quite a lot of crossover. So maybe not. Anyway. I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydoke. I try and put fun stuff out there. I don't like to engage in beastliness on any social media, actually. I just try and make people smile or sometimes inform people that a character actor has died. That's me. Death and laughter. And these podcasts have their own feed as well, which is useful for me if you follow it. And I put perhaps more details about the forthcoming releases on the Haydoke Podcasts Twitter feed, which is at Haydoke Podcasts, which, as I recall, this is at 999. So I'm hoping to get it over into the 1,000, which I think is not bad. So yeah, you can follow me there. And also I have a Facebook page, not my personal one, but I have it's called a fan page. Fan page content, blah, blah, blah. But do it. We have to. I feel all dirty now. It's got to be done, hasn't it? Singing for yourself. People have always had to sing for their supper, and I'm a terrible singer, so I have to... What do I have to do? I have to hoogasm. Is that a thing, a hoogasm? I have to have a hoogasm for your pleasure. I have to do an outpouring of love for Doctor Who, hopefully with, some slightly amusing asides and... a good hard facting. So I hope my facting has given you a hoogasm. That this whole postscript has taken a turn I wasn't expecting. Thanks for listening, and I hope that hasn't put you off your supper.